Apeman Talks Unfiltered Perspective.
Welcome to the Apeman Talks Unfiltered Perspective. Last week, there was quite a fuss about some crooked market vendors mixing chemicals into their vegetables to make them more appealing.
असं कोणत्या दुकानदाराने दाखवलं मला सांगा हे फक्त बागेसाठी डाळिंबाची किंवा याशीची द्राक्षाची याची बाग आहे ना म्हणजे वरती त्याच्यावर माल असताना वापरलं तरी चालतं त्याने काही म्हणजे साईड इफेक्ट कुठले येत नाही
झालं फ्रेश
And like the responsible citizens you are, you will forget about it by dinner time. I mean, who has time to worry about vegetables when there are cat videos to watch? Am I right? But in your haste to move on, you will fail to consider the potential consequences. You conveniently assume that your friendly neighborhood vegetable vendor would never give you such tainted produce. Well, brace yourselves, folks, because that assumption may be a steaming pile of compost. The unfortunate truth is that these unsavory practices could be happening right under your nose, and you may not be aware of it. So, before you happily chomp down on that seemingly innocent carrot, maybe it's time to look at where your food comes from and what's been done to it. There is something wrong with your food. Now, before you panic and stock up on watermelon, let me clarify. I'm not talking about junk food. This is far more sinister. It's the invisible poison in your atmosphere, sneaking into your food like a stealthy culinary assassin. What is its preferred transportation mode? Water. You might recall, a couple of years ago in India, there was a heated debate about banning cola companies due to pesticides in their drinks. But guess what? It wasn't the cola company's fault.
Have you ever thought, how did pesticide residues come into this bottled water or soft drinks? If bottled water and soft drinks had pesticide residues, the water you use to make your tea and coffee also must be having, but we never worried about it. Noodles having heavy metals. How many of you thought, how did these heavy metals reach the noodles? If lead has to be added to the noodles, probably lead is more costlier than the noodles. So nobody will add it, but it came. How did it come? If the ingredients used to make noodles had the lead, but the atta which you are making to use your chapati, atta which is used to make your chapati also must be having, or the samosa which you are eating also must be having, right? But we don't connect the dots. We all think food, if you buy in a good place, if you eat it in a good hotel, it's safe. Food is only as safe as it is grown. End of pipe solutions doesn't work. The pesticides which are used in agriculture, less than 1% actually kills the insects. 99% gets into the water, gets into the air, and comes back into your food.
Oh, and if you think this is just about vegetables, think again. Fruits, eggs, even your precious milk. Nothing is safe from this poisonous menace.
If you want mangoes in May, how do you get mangoes? You have to cut unripened ones, ripen it artificially, and sell it to you. The carbide ripening, the bananas which are seen uniformly yellow, what are they? They're all carbon ripened. The apples, the shiny apples which you see, what are they? When were they produced? Where were they produced? Do you know? California apples. You get apples from California. Can you keep it fresh? They're coated with wax. Go back to home, take out the apples in your fridge, just scrape it. You'll see the wax. We are eating all that. The watermelons which are red in color today, they're injected with injections. Color, they're injected with growth hormones. The milk which is sold, you might have seen in the news for the last several years, there are reports which says the milk is contaminated with synthetic milk. If you want to have milk at 40 rupees a liter, That's what you get. We want food cheaper. And there is a competition between the companies. They pay low to the farmers. They also contaminate and then get away with that. All brands of milk sold in Hyderabad were found to have contaminated with the synthetic milk. Do you know the eggs you buy in the market? What is the kind of eggs you are buying? They are haploid eggs. Haploid means they are produced without male and female mating together. That's the reason why if you hatch the eggs, they won't make chicken. But how they are produced? They are produced using estrogens. And what happens to those estrogens? When you eat those eggs, they'll come back to you. That's one reason today the puberty in girl child has advanced. The gynec problems in women has increased. The breast development in men has increased. Do you know last year's India Today's survey shows that the largest number of plastic surgeries done in India are to remove breasts in men. We got into that kind of situation where food, which is supposed to be healthy, is creating all these problems.
The whole food business is turning into a terrible game show where everyone loses. Now, you might be wondering, Apeman, what's the solution? Well, the corporate world has an answer for you. Genetically modified foods. Take for instance the infamous BT-Brinjal, which sounds like a high-tech eggplant superhero, but is actually just biotechnology brinjal.
BT-Brinjal. To tell you simply what BT-Brinjal is, when pesticide is sprayed from outside, it damages the environment. Like I said, only 99% goes into the environment, only 1% kills the insect. So a scientist thought, why not we produce insecticide in the plant itself? So plant produces insecticide. So whichever insect eats it will die. But what happens to us who eats that?
It doesn't matter how high up your fancy studio apartment is, because this problem is coming for you like a relentless food-based horror movie. There's no escape. There is a threat to traditional farming in India. You see, governments love to persuade farmers to adopt new practices in the name of progress. But much like that questionable tattoo you got on a whim, there's often a hidden cost. Take Punjab's farmers, for example. They were sweet-talked into monoculture farming, and now they're stuck with the consequences, like a bad hangover after a wild night out.
ਡੀਜ਼ਲ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਮਹਿੰਗਾ, ਮਸ਼ੀਨਾਂ ਦਾ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਰੇਟ ਵੱਧ ਗਈ, ਬਾਕੀ ਬੀਜ ਬਹੁਤ ਮਹਿੰਗਾ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਟਰੈਕਟਰ ਦੀ ਵਹਾਈ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਮਹਿੰਗੀ ਹੋ ਗਈ ਜੀ.
The generational debt began after the government incentivized farmers like his dad to give up traditional crops for wheat and rice.
ਜੋ ਦਾਦਾ ਵਗੈਰਾ ਕਰਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਉਹ ਤਾਂ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਗੰਨਾ ਗੁੰਨਾ ਲਾਉਂਦੇ ਹੁੰਦੇ ਸੀ ਜੀ, ਮੂੰਗੀ ਮਾਂਗੀ, ਉਸ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਹਰੀ ਕ੍ਰਾਂਤੀ ਆ ਗਈ ਜੀ, ਚੌਲ ਤੇ ਕਣਕ ਦਾ ਨਿਰਭਰ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਜੀ.
Yes, they got dependent on wheat and rice. You see, one of the biggest problems with the Green Revolution was the adoption of monoculture farming practices. These practices were heavily influenced by American agriculture. The idea was that by growing only one type of crop at a time, farmers could maximize yields and profits. And while that might sound lovely on paper, it turns out it's not all sunshine and lollipops. The Green Revolution was meant to benefit India's agriculture sector, and it did have some positive effects. It increased food production significantly and helped stave off famine.
The Green Revolution started in the 1960s, when parts of the country were crippled by famine.
The immensity of India's food problem is baffling and frustrating.
Punjabis were always farmers, but they took on the burden of feeding India by switching to wheat and rice strains developed by American scientists.
Many new types of hybrid seed have been developed, and the farmer remains unaware of their potential.
Even though Punjab is just 1.5% of the nation's land area, the state supplied up to 70% of the country's wheat and 40% of its rice for decades after making the switch to monocultures.
But like everything, there's a flip side. And this is what happened.
They require chemical fertilizers, toxic pesticides, heavy machinery, and use up lots of water.
Punjab farmers have the highest debt rate in the country. They basically got locked on to what is known as the technological treadmill of monoculture farming.
Technological treadmill? Well, monoculture farming has a number of disadvantages. For one, it depletes the soil of nutrients. Because the same crop is grown year after year, sucking up the same nutrients like a greedy tiny plant vampire. This leads to a need for more chemical fertilizers, which seep into the water supply and cause pollution. It's a vicious cycle, really. But wait, there's more. Monoculture farming also makes crops more susceptible to pests and diseases. When you got a whole field of the same plant, it's like an all-you-can-eat buffet for pests. This leads to an increased reliance on pesticides, which, again, pollute the environment.
At first, farmers were given monoculture seeds funded by the Rockefeller and Ford Foundations and the US government. They continued to buy those varieties because they were the only crops their government would subsidize. Cultivating the same monocultures year after year depletes the soil and makes pests more resistant. So farmers must continue to buy more toxic pesticides, more fertilizers, and newly engineered seeds that can tolerate those extra chemicals.
And let's not forget the impact on biodiversity. When you replace diverse traditional farming practices with a single crop, you are telling Mother Nature to take a hike. The result is a loss of plant and animal species that would have otherwise thrived in a more diverse ecosystem. Now, some of the Indian farmers are caught in the middle of all this. They are being encouraged to adopt these practices, often with promises of higher profits. But the reality is that they are becoming increasingly dependent on expensive chemicals and seeds and facing mounting debt. It's a classic case of being stuck between a rock and a hard place, or in this case, between a pesticide and a monoculture. So, while the Green Revolution may have started with good intentions, it's clear that it's had some unintended consequences.
Farmers like Singh get that subsidized rate at a government-authorized auction yard.
ਇੱਥੇ ਲਿਆ ਕੇ ਸਫਾਈ ਕਰਕੇ ਇਹ ਗੱਟੂਆਂ 'ਚ ਪਾਈ ਜਾਊ, ਗੱਟੂਆਂ 'ਚ ਪਾ ਕੇ ਇਹ ਅੱਗੇ ਵੱਡੀਆਂ ਮੰਡੀਆਂ 'ਚ ਭੇਜੀ ਜਾਊਗੀ, ਵੱਡੀਆਂ ਮੰਡੀਆਂ 'ਚ ਭੇਜ ਕੇ ਗਾਹਾਂ ਬਾਣੀਆਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਪਰਚੀ ਦਿਓ ਜੀ।
ये आपके 300 कट्टे की ओके ठीक है।
ਤੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਘੱਟ ਸ਼ਰ ਟੁੱਟਦੇ ਆ ਜੀ ਰੁਪਈਏ ਤਾਂ ਬਸ ਇੱਕ ਦੇਣਾ ਲੈਣਾ ਸ਼ਰ ਬਰਾਬਰ ਹੋਈ ਜਾਂਦਾਗਾ ਵੀ ਰੋਟੀ ਦਾ ਚੱਲਦਾ ਰਹਿੰਦਾਗਾ ਜਵਾਕਾਂ ਦਾ।
The earnings are enough to pay back loans he took out for the fertilizers, pesticides, and machinery he's used for this harvest. He's left with less than 20% of the profits, and most of that is used as down payment on the seeds of his next crop.
ਇਹ ਜੀ ਹੁਣ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੀ ਆ ਵੀ ਇੰਨਾ ਟਾਈਮ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ ਚੱਲਦੇ ਨੂੰ ਕਰਜ਼ਾ ਜ਼ਿਆਦੇ ਆ ਸਾਰਾ ਕਰਜ਼ਾ ਲੈਂਦੇ ਰਹਿੰਦੇ ਆ ਮੂਹਰੇ ਹੋਰ ਕੰਮ ਖੇਤੀ ਛੱਡ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ ਜੀ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹ 'ਚ ਤਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਹੁਣ ਹੋਰ ਕੰਮ ਕਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ ਜੇ ਕੋਈ ਆਉਂਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਜੀ ਅਸੀਂ।
Wait a minute. Haven't you been thinking that farmers' lives are improving? At least their income must have doubled, hasn't it? Nope. The income of Indian farmers are plummeting faster than their hopes and dreams.
Government of India, the new government in 2014 when they came to power, they said they will double the farmers' income. And look at between 2012 and 2018, what has happened. It didn't double. And where growth majorly happened is on the wages. Wages where they get as working as labor. Nothing happened on the cultivation front. In the cultivation, they get, it's just about 23% increase which has happened. And this is the national average from agriculture, livestock, businesses, and also wages. Together is the 8,000 rupees per month they make.
Sure, the government raised the daily wage, but they left farmers high and dry. This wage hike has made it harder for farmers to hire help as labor costs have skyrocketed. Now don't get me wrong, I'm all for raising the daily wage. But it's like trying to fix a leaky faucet while ignoring the flood in your basement. So what exactly is the government trying to imply by raising the daily wage and ignoring farmers' income? Get a job at a store or a factory nearby instead of farming? Indian farmers are scrapping by on a meager 8,000 rupees per month, which is quite frankly pathetic. The revenue for their efforts is nowhere close to what they deserve.
Today, a ton of sugar cane, is 2,000 rupees. A ton of firewood is 4,000 rupees. How farmers can live?
Picture this. Firewood, that humble fuel for your cozy campfire, is actually double the cost of sugarcane. Yes, you heard me right. That sweet, delicious plant that takes a whooping 12 to 16 months of backbreaking labor for a farmer to plant, grow and deliver to the sugar mill. It's like discovering that a paperclip costs more than a bar of silver. Low income is not just their problem. They struggle to procure seeds and fertilizers.
So farmers have lost their economic independence, not just economic independence, physical independence as well. These were the photographs which we have taken, farmers standing in queue for fertilizers, standing in queue for seeds which they can produce, fertilizer which they can make by composting, but they are not subsidized. If you buy from the market, they are subsidized. Lopsided policies from the government.
These problems, coupled with various other factors, are driving them to kill themselves.
In the last 20 years, 3 lakh farmers have committed suicide. Every day about 48.
Financial stress drives about 10,000 Indians in agriculture to take their own lives each year.
Debt plagues more than half of India's 90 million farming households, and collectively they owe banks and opportunistic moneylenders millions of euros. Since 1995, at least 300,000 farmers have killed themselves.
We roughly have, some 12,000 farmers and rural workers committing suicide every year.
This woman lost her husband 2 years ago. Paying the bills is a constant struggle, and her grandchildren feel the effects.
Why should you care about farmers' problems in India? After all, you are not sweating in the fields or contemplating drastic measures due to financial hardship. Well, my friends, the reason you should care is that these agriculture woes impact the very food that ends up on your plate. It's like a culinary game of dominoes, and we are all teetering on the brink. You see, in the not-so-distant future, you might be able to stash away mountains of wealth for your children, but you won't be able to guarantee their health. Garbage in, garbage out. If you're gazing into a crystal ball to ponder a burning question, what does the future hold for farming in India? Number 1. Wealthy individuals and corporations are snatching up land faster than you imagine. You can say agriculture real estate bonanza. Unfortunately, in India, the data is as opaque as a brick wall, so I can't provide you with the details. However, around the world, billionaires are buying land like never before.
Bill Gates owns more land than all of the entire city of New York. Jeff Bezos' land is double the amount, clocking in at 420,000 acres. John Malone, the largest private landowner in America, owns 2.2 million acres all by himself, a landmass slightly smaller than the island of Puerto Rico.
Number 2. Say goodbye to the traditional farmers of yesteryear, because the big bad corporations with their high-tech labs are poised to swoop in and take over the agriculture scene. It's like a battle between an antiquated tractor and a battle tank. Now let's face it, many farmers keep tilling their soil simply because they feel trapped, victims of the sunken cost fallacy. They poured their blood, sweat and tears into this way of life, and it's tough to walk away. But how long can they continue? As we speak, farmers are turning to secondary jobs, often unskilled and labor-intensive, to make their ends meet. And with their focus on these extra gigs, their own well-being suffers, leading to premature death. Add to that the toxic cocktail of fertilizers and pesticides, and you've got a recipe for cancer and other terminal illnesses. While you are so far in this video, you may have suggestions or advice for making farming more efficient. But let me tell you, you don't know what it takes to be a farmer unless you've done it.
ਇੱਥੇ ਆ ਕੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਹੱਲ ਸੁਣੇ, ਸਾਡੇ ਬਾਰੇ ਸੋਚੇ, ਫੇਰ ਪਤਾ ਲੱਗਦਾਗਾ। ਵੱਡੇ ਵੱਡੇ ਏਸੀ ਵਾਲੇ ਕਮਰਿਆਂ 'ਚ ਬੈਠ ਕੇ ਤਾਂ ਬਹੁਤ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦੀਆਂ ਨੇ। ਜਾਂ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਪਤਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਣਕ ਕਿਵੇਂ ਪੈਦਾ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਕਿਵੇਂ ਕਟਾਈ ਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਕਿੰਨਾ ਕੁ ਕਿਸਾਨ ਡਾਊਨ ਆ, ਕਿੰਨਾ ਕੁ ਨਾ। ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਦੁੱਖ ਪਏ ਨਹੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਕੀ ਪਤਾਗਾ, ਜਿਨ੍ਹਾਂ ਨੇ ਦੁੱਖ ਦੇਖੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਬੰਦੇ ਨੂੰ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਦੁੱਖ ਦਾ ਪਤਾ ਵੀ ਕੀ ਹੈ।
One thing's for sure though, these very farmers won't pass the plow down to their children.
ਇਹਦੇ 'ਚ ਕਿਸਾਨ ਬਚੂ ਕਿੱਥੋਂ ਜੀ? ਬੱਚੇ ਵੀ ਪਾਲਣੇ ਆ, ਬੱਚਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਅਸੀਂ ਇਹੋ ਜਿਹੇ ਕੰਮਾਂ 'ਚ ਨਹੀਂ ਪਾਵਾਂਗੇ।
Fear not, my friends. For as long as there's money to be made, you will still have food on your table. This video is from the World Economic Forum.
The idea about this greenhouse is we even use less water, we use 50% less energy. Our tomato plants grow in a hydroponic system, so we know for sure that everything is clean and we can...
Yes, we will see increased crop yields and more food than ever before. However, we must ask ourselves at what cost. For example, say goodbye to natural sunlight and hello to LED lights. And let's not forget how vital sunlight is. It's one of the 5 essential elements for life and brimming with nutrients that we are still trying to comprehend. But what they say? Bring in LED? Come on! So sure, you will eat in the future. But don't be shocked if a loved one who never smoked or drank ends up with cancer. We have ways to measure pesticide levels. But how can we determine the extent of genetic modification in our food? That's a mystery for a common man. Before we wrap up, let's consider whether there's a silver lining in the rather gloomy future of Indian farming. Fear not, all is not lost. There are some truly amazing people and NGOs working tirelessly to improve farmers' lives in India.
The first success came in Punukula. Punukula is a village in Khammam district which became completely pesticide free. The village which was spending about 60 lakhs per annum, they completely stopped using pesticides. Agriculture minister came. He said, wonderful, what do you want? He asked farmers. Farmers said, make Andhra Pradesh pesticide free. He was amazed. He said, certainly I'll do, but what do you want? I said, we are happy with what we have, but just change all the agricultural practices. He brought all the agriculture university scientists and Department of Agriculture together to see and then make a change. They said, sir, this is one village, we can't do it. It is not possible. Then came Yanabavi. This is about 80 kilometers from here. Completely organic village. In the last 3 years, more than 10,000 people have visited the village to know how they are doing farming. But this also has not changed anything on the government. But consumers have changed. Many people started understanding what is good for them. This is a village called Dorli. Dorli is in Varda. After Telangana, you hear a lot of suicides from Varda. In 2005, the village was put up for sale. Farmers decided we can't do farming. They have put up the village for sale. We went there in 2006. We said, can we start working together? Today, all of them have repaid their loans. All of them are back to farming. It's possible. It's possible.
However, we must admit that their efforts alone won't be enough. People like Ramanjanelu are true heroes. But we need more individuals like him to step up and make a real difference to both farming and Indian farmers' lives. Thank you for tuning in. Until next week, be crazy, be you. Good night. Every week I'll discuss the trending news you should care about and what you can learn from it. Please hit the like button if you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to our channel. That's the only way you can show your support for us.